I originally had something planned, but due to circumstance, I switched gears, but I think it's fortuitous in terms of what I'd like to say. I've got just a few minutes. I'd like to take off after Michael's talking about self at the end and how important that is, and bring some things up I hope that people in the audience can relate to, because I think a lot of folks, you can see it in their eyes, they're stressed out, right? They don't understand what they're up against, and I'm going to try to illustrate that a little bit. I want to go back to something in terms of education. It's critically important because, you know, a lot of us have been up against something for a very long time. We had no idea what the hell it is. You have no idea what to deal with. You feel helpless and adrift, and you're not in a good position, right? You're just not in a good, healthy place. For me, and I got this book last spring, about a year ago, and I didn't read it. No, I had other things to do. And one night I picked it up, and I got it through legislative channels. Lori can tell you that. And I picked this book up, and it was like manna. You know, it was reading a lot. It's pretty heavy. It's not an easy read, but it was like manna in terms of things clicking into place. Understanding, and you could see through a lot of the problems. And it gave me initially, and I contacted Lori, some stakes in the ground to understand what's happening. And there's one sentence or one paragraph that I want to read or focus on. I'm just going to focus on out of the book. Does anybody have access to this book? There's a lot of good resources out there, but this happened to be Dr. Childress's Foundations. Okay. And this is the only thing I'll read, and I'll go to the unscripted part of what I usually do. On page 27, and everybody in this room is in the same boat or was, talks about divorce. Halfway through, the child acts as an ongoing unifying force within the family and through the continued parental roles and affectional bonds that each parent shares with the child. This represents a significant realignment of the role relationships in the family. The key thing I found, and this really hit, in an intact family structure, the marital unit forms the core of the family structure. In a separated family structure, the parental bonds form the core structure of the family. So, to me, that implies that both people are going to play this. You're going to go back and say, look, you know, no matter what it is between us, whatever informs this thing, we've got a higher calling here, and we're going to work on that level to ensure that those are the priorities for both of us. So when that doesn't work out on one side or the other for one reason or another, the whole thing gets out of whack pretty quick. I can't see it up here now. Hang on. There's some IT help. Wait, you know what? Hang on. How do I, oh, never mind. Let me, I have three parts that I wanted to speak to. And again, like a lot of folks that have stood up here, I'm nobody either. You know, I came from a very black and white world. Technical background, political background. You know, the world I worked in, you were either the hammer or the nail. I mean, there was very little in between, and you worked from that premise. It's not a dog-eat-dog thing, it's just the reality of the thing. There's not a lot of gray areas. One of the things that I want to talk about is, which we're all here, so we're a step ahead, is the education part of this, right? Is the understanding of what we're in. You know, what the ramifications of this thing are. Your reaction to it is key. You know, how you react to stimuli is key. And the one thing that has been brought up here is document everything. And I mean document everything. There is many occasions that have come up in my own experience where something came up from a date. Well, you may not have everything, but you know what, I've got something. Every transmittal that I send out, I document. Everything, I had to do this. And it gets a little paranoia, but you have to understand that that's a key part of documenting your process from your side. It may be all you have at some point in time. I want to talk about some things here in terms of education, understanding. I'm going to use something called the Walmart example. You're Christina. Do we know each other?
We're both from Crawford County.
Oh, okay. All All right, so if I'm behind Christina at Walmart, right, and I happen to catch her checking out and I get her codes, her credit card codes, and I happen to follow her out and I catch her license plate. Then I go back in and I say, you know, that woman just stole a bunch of stuff on the bottom of her card. Here's her number. She doesn't know me from Adam, I don't know you. So the police come and they say, hey, you have this stuff. Did you know, there's an anonymous report that, you know, you stole some things. You're immediately on the defensive saying, well, I didn't steal anything, right? And then I'm posting stuff with your license plate, find out who you are, and say, well, this woman is stealing from Walmart. You know someone on here. You find out about this, but you don't know who I am. So then I've got your numbers, and I can buy things and send them to me from you. And I'm getting stuff from you and posting this. And you would be losing your mind. I mean, you would be losing your mind. And then I'm posting things that not only are you buying me things, you're contacting me and making allegations. It's pretty juiced up stuff. You know, I'm pretty wigged out over here. Anybody in that circumstance would be completely freaked out, right? I would say to you that, at least in my experience and in talking to people, it's equally as disorienting because your reality is flipped in many cases. It's just like some anonymous person that takes some information and starts, you know, jigging you on social media. I mean, it's a bit spooky. So I think it's very important to understand our reality from a perspective of a rational side of this thing. I'm going to get to part 3 in a second, but I want to say something really important, and Michael brought this up, is accept your role in all of this. You know, it's easy in the circumstances that you might find yourself in to create monsters. And I look at it like this, and I think most people would share this view. You know, the person that causes you the most pain, their wins in this life are wins for your kids, right? I mean, if there's some good fortune on, that's a good thing. Don't discount that. I think we have to understand that we're dealing with situations where people genuinely are sick. There has to be some empathy, or you create a monster in your own mind. And it's not really dealing with reality. I want to speak to that in a second, too. This is just, you know, my own feeling. So if you accept your role, there was something, if you find the time and the ability to go through some kind of a process. I went through, and still am going through a 12-step process. But one of the things that it provides for you, and I'll speak to that briefly, is some introspection, really. I mean, you took responsibility and got yourself into a situation, probably with all the right reasons, you know, maybe the love thought. And you were in that situation, and you probably did things over the course of time to hide it, to put on the... You were complicit, at least in part of this. It's important to own at least a part of what happened and take responsibility for your role in it. I truly believe that. And that's the victim versus victor. If you're constantly a victim, if you're working from the victim side of the coin, it's a bad place to be. It puts you in a bad place mentally. And folks that are professionals can speak to that better than I. And I think, too, the other thing that I found is dealing with shame and self-image. Everybody in this room has been, you know, at a cocktail party or at some function, you know, after the fact, and they'll say, how's the kids? How's your kids doing? How's your boy doing? What do you say? I don't know. Well, here's the situation. And I think that we instinctively as parents have some shame in that, because then it opens up, well, what the hell happened? Why don't you have your kids? Why don't you know where your daughter is? Hey, I saw your family at the prom. Where were you? There are people that really don't know, but at the same time, that falls on you to explain on some level, or not, right? But I mean, I think that dealing with shame and self-image, and I think, and I've talked to a lot of people through Lori and others, that people tend to, as opposed to walk a public face, just go a level below. You know, it's easier to do. You don't have to confront people. You don't have to explain anything. You know what I mean? You don't have to explain your side of it. So I think that a big part of working on yourself is right here. It's dealing with shame and self-image. Anybody who's gone through a divorce, will tell you that the first, hey, how's your wife or how's your husband? And you have to say, well, you know what, we're not together anymore. Oh, you're not? I have not heard. So then you've got that side of the coin where you're talking about, well, you know. But with children, that's magnified and amplified by 10. We all know that. You know, you're seeing, or you're, hey, I saw your son was at the meet, or was at the swim meet, or, you know, doing this. And if you didn't know about that, why didn't you know about it? And these are oftentimes well-intended people that really have no idea, right? Your personal sphere versus the public sphere, your physical state and mental state. I think these two things are very important. The hardest times, it was just brought up, are the down times for a lot of us, right? When you're home and you're not really plugged in, and man, it's like the weight of the world starts to just burn on your shoulders, and you're trying like hell to, you know, keep the game face going. I think they're interrelated, your personal sphere, your public sphere. I think that one of the things that, and I'll get to this in my part 3, there's just not enough time, is to make sure that everybody in this room takes care of himself, takes care of yourself. You know, it's the old thing when you're in the airplane and it starts to take a nosedive, right? And did you ever have that happen? I did once. You put that thing on yourself first, and then you deal with your kids. If you're not in a good place, it doesn't, the rest don't matter. You can't be there for anybody else. You just can't. It's impossible. Right? So your physical state and your mental state are intertwined. If this ain't working, right, this probably ain't happening. In fact, if this is defective, this is going to suffer, right? And I would say one other thing here in this first self-awareness thing in this education, we're getting it here. I think this is, and I've got some strong feelings on this, and I think we can start today, in terms of networking, okay? Is validation and feedback loops, and everyone needs a friend for life. And what I mean by that is very simple. You're not going to go, if you're going across the street and you're on social, whatever you're doing, you're talking to these people that have really no idea what the hell you're talking about. And you only become a bore. They don't get where you're coming from. Everybody in this room has a sense of what they've been through. So it's like a 12-step thing where you have a number where you can call somebody. We talked about this, Rod, on the way up from Pittsburgh, that I would make myself available to talk to somebody in that you know, those wee hours or whatever the hell when you're having a downtime. I think that's a key thing here. I think we pick and choose wisely on this too. I think that people who understand, Lori and I have talked about this, and helped each other a couple of times. Because you get it, and you can relate to it. So, education. Again, I'm not a mental health professional at all, but I will tell anybody that's gone through something to document it. Am I correct? Document everything to the extent that you can, or you think you have to, because you probably have to. Let me go to the next point of this. It's been brought up that, you know, a lot of times you're painted the bad person, right? There's a lot of stuff out there, slander, projection, whatever the hell it is. I'm speaking from, I'm not going to get specific, but many times people take the bait. Many times there's an allegation made, somebody acts poorly, and they fall right into the trap. It's like a police officer saying to you, hey, stay away, they're trying to get you on paper. Trying to get you on paper. I'm going to give you an example of a guy. It's a true story. It was a very good friend of mine, his brother. We've all heard stories like this. This is a few years ago. This is 2010. During the summer, he thought his wife was seeing somebody else. So he came home. He's just on the other side of the border. Confronted her in the day, around the lunch hour. And I guess this thing devolved quickly. All right? So he's not a bad guy. I don't know him that well. I know his brother. So what happened to him was he ended up leaving, and the door slammed, so he punched through the door. I guess the glass door. He punched through it and then left. Well, he had cut his hand up pretty bad, so he ended up going to the hospital instead of going back to work. When he was at the hospital, he got a call that it was the local police. He was reported to the police station. There was, evidence that he had, and the kids did see it. He acted for it. He missed this today. But what happened to this guy was self-fulfilling in a way. He not only had to go to the hospital, he had a court appearance, he was barred from the house. Okay? Stupid move. He was living separately. He lost his job, related but unrelated. And the other side of the coin was he got a DUI about 2 months later. So, you know, in a period of 3 months, his whole world flipped upside down. And he was in a very bad place for a very long time. I know that for a fact. So, what I'm trying to say here to particularly men or anybody is that don't self-fulfill a prophecy. If you've been labeled something, it's easy to put your name on the dotted line. It's very easy. It's very easy. So I say never take the bait. Not always easy to do. Resist getting even. Has anybody, in the course of your experience, ever felt like getting even on some level down below? Man, I'd like to get even here. That's normal, right? That's a normal human response. When you're wounded, right, you want to respond back. It's innate. We're hardwired for this kind of thing. I think that we have to take a step back, understand what we're trying to achieve by our actions. And that sometimes involves our inactions. And it's very hard to do. It can be very hard to do. And I'm asking you to think about your own experiences where you felt compelled to do something, to make amends, you know, to get your side out of it. And when I say lead a purpose-based life, it feeds into the rest of this stuff. And I'm guilty of it. It's being petty. You know, it's being petty. And it's a retaliatory move. You hear something about you from somebody else, again, maybe in your case. So you immediately say, you know what, here's something you don't know. I think we've all done that. And all of these kinds of things, I think in your heart of hearts, you know it's not a good thing. You feel compelled to do it. It may be a little dopamine hit or whatever. You feel good at the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, you look back and you say, man, it's just my mouth shut. The other things I wanted to talk about is self-fulfilling prophecies and the do's and don'ts, and self-medication. It's a big deal. I've talked to a lot of people that, you know, maybe didn't have a problem, that got into a problem, or let a problem overtake them, or let a prescription problem overtake them. They become apathetic, right? Maybe not suicidal, but not so hot about living. You're on that bubble. All of these things reduce your capacity, right, to respond in the right way. And the reason I say that is because all of those things knock you out a little bit. They do. You're in a struggle. If you're taking this stuff literally, it's a spiritual battle as much as anything, right? I mean, you are in control. The only thing you control is what you do, how you react. And reactive forces within sometimes will really set you off in a bad way. When I say do not inflict yourself on others, sex, sympathy, needy. You know, you have these holes in your life, you're in a bad place, and you're needy. So, without getting into the weeds, I think we all understand that at some point you're at a low point in your life. So you try to take those, you know, those basic needs. Don't inflict yourself on somebody. Take this time to reassess who you are and what you're doing. I'll get that in my third part. But it's a critical time. And it's a time like no other, so I'm talking about people who are recently understanding what they're not doing 20 years later. But take this time, particularly when you're hurting, to reassess from within what's happening around you and how you deal with it. It's that simple, very complex. When I say do not self-pity, no one cares. People don't care. I mean, it sounds corny, but I didn't even know what the hell I was talking about a year ago. I was not armed with any kind of what I consider to be definitive information that I could point to and say, here's something I didn't know. So it kind of makes sense. But I'm not going to walk up and down my street with this book and say, hey, did you read this book? You got to read this book. You got to read this book to know what I'm going through. Every day, somewhere in the world, a bus pulls up with a bunch of people there. Every day, there's human tragedy and human suffering on some level that people can relate to. Every day. Every day, in counties across the Commonwealth and elsewhere, there's horrific stories about kids that are abused. And these people live in that world every day. And that takes me to my next big thing. And I have Facebook. Social media.
Jack, you can't go there.
Pardon?
You can't go there.
No, but social media, I'm just saying that, you know, everybody puts their social media out there, and for the love of God, people, don't do stupid things on social media. Don't do stupid things. Just don't do it. If you feel like, and we're all guilty of it on some level, right? We're all guilty of it. Just don't do it. When I say stupid, it means something different for you, you, and you. But I say it all the time. And you know, when you're hurt, you know, you do stuff, it's a throwaway moment and it don't go away. I'm just saying, don't do stupid things on social media. You're not going to prove to the world a damn thing, you know, by your action on social media. You know, you're getting this point here. I got to make this point. I'm going to get back to this in the next section here, but also do understand and implement healthy boundaries. And this is a tough thing. You know, if you're an alienated person, you feel like you don't have boundaries, right? You feel like you've been erased. You don't have boundaries. You know what I mean? To plug into. The reality is you do have boundaries. Your actions are your own boundaries. You always have to keep in mind, I made this part up. Once a parent, always a parent. Even if your children are not in your life, right? So you may feel like you're not a parent. You know, like I got nothing. I don't see my kids. I haven't talked to my daughters. You're still a parent. And I want to get to that in the third part. That never goes away. That's a responsibility you have to carry with you, irrespective of whatever the hell happens. And do as it's self-care. You are all you have. It goes back to this point here. Maybe the hardest thing to do is to, if at this point in your life and in your experience, this is a great opportunity to really try to drill into yourself a little bit. I think if you can do that and find like parental alienation in terms of feedback loops and other kinds of resources, it'll put you in a better place quicker than just taking it one day at a time in sort of an aimless way. I truly believe that. It's a time like no other. So this is discombobulating because that's not what's on the screen. All right, so. So it's easy, excuse me, it's easy for all of us to say, man, I got this situation, it's totally crazy, and it's monstrous, it's destroying me, it's destroying my family, it's destroying blah, 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 blah. And like I said, I think that a lot of us are on the same wavelength, but I think there's a personal accountability feature built into all of this, right? You know, and I've heard it over and over again, there's always two sides to every story. You own part of your own story. You do. It's absolutely true. I'll give you an example. If you're in a bad marriage, many of us, probably most of us, have kind of kept things buried for a long time. You keep things buried. You have the public face, either literally like I did, or you've got the outward face, the face facing the street where people see. And we've all went through this where you say, hey, Jill and Mike are splitting up, and you go, holy crap. I just saw them at dinner the other night. What happened? Well, there's probably a lot going on there.
Bless you.
Bless you. In your own personal accountability, seek truth. One of the things that I did, and it was by way of referral, was started a 12-step program. And this is coming from a guy that lived in a black and white world, right? Where you're either the hammer or you're the nail. And if somebody would have said 7 years ago, hey, I'm in a 12-step program, I'd have said, dude, get your shit together. Straight away. But I think that these episodes that we share are so completely soul-searing, right? Where you really, I don't care how old, if you're 50 or what, you're having a real identity crisis. You do. As was brought up earlier, you know, your whole identity has been stripped away, you know, because you left or whatever happened, but particularly with your kids and those relationships. So I say this can't be happening, can it? So I got into a program because I knew a couple of things. I knew that I needed help, and I knew my picture was badly broken. And, you know, through that process, where you sort of surrender some things to gain some things, you know, not always comfortable, not where you want to be, driving down 79 on a winter night to go to a meeting. It has been, in my case, immeasurably helpful in terms of trying to find my personal way forward. In trying to find, you know, some truths that maybe I was hiding from. Okay? Not pointing all over here, but part of what brought me to this point. And you were going. Okay? And particularly when you do sort of kind of an internal moral inventory and you have to really look at yourself and say, yeah, you know what, I've got my own things I got to work on. There's a purpose behind doing this. It's to not make you into somebody else. It's to take that broken you and systematically try on an incremental basis to get the best you possible. You know, the best version of yourself, as they're commonly said. Seek truth in yourself and your actions and what got you to this point in your life. I don't care how successful you were, what you did, who you are in your community, how much you made. You got knocked flat on your ass and now you're up trying to do something else. This sort of internal dialogue that you go through, if you do it right, is pretty painful, or can be at times, but it's pretty beautiful too. So, this whole thing that, you know, we go through, we tend when you're not in a good mental state, you're not in a good physical state. Family and community. Stay engaged in family and community. Right? That's something I struggle with. The last thing I wanted to do was go to a public meeting and do something. That's the last damn place I wanted to be. I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to go there. Have you ever had that struggle where you know, there's something coming up and you know, and, oh man, I got to go see a bunch of people. It's like, this is ridiculous. But I think if you do that and you're focusing on the very best of yourself, staying engaged in your family, your brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, whoever's in your support structure, the more you're doing, the less you're bitching about the problems that are facing you when you woke up that day. And maintain a well-rounded outlook. I think it's critically important. Continuous self-improvement. I'm not one of these guys that runs around, you know, but there comes a time, right? Everybody here that's spoken has alluded to this part about taking care of self. And it's the first thing to go. And if you have a weakness or a chink, now's the time it's going to be exploited, whether it's substance abuse or something else. So when I say continuous self-improvement, all I'm saying here is that you have an opportunity every day to do something, right? Do something. I don't care if it's, you know, if you don't, go for a walk. I was it's the last place I wanted to be. In the middle of winter, I'm at the gym. There's nobody in there, you know. And the guy downstairs turned the lights on and off like you're at the bar. You know, is anybody up there? And yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here. But continue to push forward. Continue to do your thing. Continue to, you know, take care of yourself. You're your best and only billboard, right? And when you walk into the room, people get a vibe with what you're about. They do. I mean, you know, we're all here for a reason. We have our moments. It's raw. Today was pretty emotional, I think, for everybody, right? And that's okay. That's why we're here. But you're your best billboard. This group is a great group, and it's the genesis of something I think could be very helpful for all of us if we continuously do this right. Spirit-minded body. Rod spoke to this. Michael spoke to this. As you work through yourself, don't neglect yourself, right? It's easy to do. You're depressed, you eat. You're depressed, you drink. Or overdrink, or overindulge, or whatever the hell it is that takes you somewhere you don't want to be. And that cycle will, am I right? That cycle will continue to take you down that road until you go to the doctor, and your doctor says, hey man, you're all over the board. We got to get you on some meds to get you down. We got to help you. We got to help you. Get in front of that. I think the key thing here for this that I'm trying to say here today is that, you know, all of us have a shared history without even knowing it. Just by a show of hands, how many of you folks have been, had bad things said about you in a larger context? I mean, things that attributed to you that just weren't true. That's a hell of a place to be. That's a hell of a place to be. You can't control that. You may think you can, and you'll overcompensate in other ways that don't make sense. The only thing that you can control is yourself. I had a guy just come up to me, trying to think of when this was. It was last fall, it was around November. He was talking about a friend of ours. He said, "Hey, I work with this guy." He happened to be a man. He said, "I really appreciate it." He went through a bruising divorce and he never talked about it. He never talked about it. And there was stuff going around about him. Stuff. Whether it was true, who knows? But this guy never talked about it. He said, "I have immeasurable respect for that." You don't have to respond. Or you may feel like you have to. You really do not have to respond. Don't do it. Particularly if it takes you in places you don't need to be. I'll close out my little session here by saying, what's the purpose? All of us were probably in a pretty bad place at some point, right? We talked a little bit about that. Maybe you're still in a bad place. You find yourself keep going over here and going into that bad place. What you do, how you network, how you perceive your situation, and what you do about it is the only thing you really have. Not what somebody else tells you, not because somebody else had a victory over here. If you're struggling with something, let's say it's a substance. Let's say it's how you're coping right now. It's a coping mechanism. Recognize it. It's a problem, recognize it. Do something about it. If you're struggling with the social stigma of what people think you think they think, or whatever that is, deal with it head on by dealing with yourself first. Right? Don't self-fulfill anything that's been said, or what you think people might think about your situation. Don't let it happen. Do not let it happen. A guy like me that lives in a black and white world and has had to pivot here in some real gray areas, right? It's not because it's comfortable. It's not because I'm good at it. It's because at the end of the day, I know in my life my children will need me. There's no doubt about it. And I don't want to be some washed up guy with a bad attitude. I want to be the best version I can in their time of need, whatever that would look like at that point in time. That's it. That's the mission. It's that simple. So find the time to work on those things. I guess you're going over. Find the time to work on those things, and the time is now. If you think this makes sense to you, and if you think you need something, you probably do. And for me, it was sort of doing this, right? Trying to find what that thing is. Identifying, in a real sense, what you're up against, what this thing is. It has a name, right? There's a defense against that's helpful, and that's in part documenting and understanding what you're doing and not doing. And the third thing is, and it's going to be different things for different people, depending on your affiliation types and what you think. But if you reach out to yourself and say, "Hey, I need help," and you find a program that works for you, do it. You won't regret it.
And you had talked about some people trying to network here, like, we've got so many resources right here.
I have a great idea, right? Lori and I have talked about this too. So we're all in the room. I can tell you, I've talked to Lori sometimes when there's something when you're in a program it's called HALT, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. HALT. So if you feel like you're in one of those corners, you pick up the phone and say, "Hey man,
Having a rough day.
Having a rough day." So some kind of referral where you just, "This is Jack's number," and that kind of thing. I'd be happy to talk to anybody that needs it. Happy. Not that I have all the answers. That's never the point. The point is you can really understand. Maybe provide some levity, support. Just listen. We don't have to be experts. None of us here are charging by the hour to talk about these kinds of things. But most of us understand what's going on and the ramifications. It's a hideous thing, to be sure. but having somebody at the other end of the line that understands and will take a few minutes is a good thing. And I thank Lori too for her understanding from time to time. And it's overwhelming for one person to take 30 calls. You can't do it. Yeah. Listen, thank you very much. I'm